All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the VMware multi-cloud live stream. We have Francisco with us today, and he's gonna. I'll let him introduce himself in a minute. Just a reminder, we bring you these on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Schedule's a little erratic right now because we're heading to the holidays. We're coming off VMworld, all those kinds of things. I think we've got kind of a mix of one a week and then two a week, probably carry us through the end of the year with all the holidays coming up. Hey, just a reminder what we're focused on. We rolled out of VMworld just a few weeks ago, and we're picking up a new theme as we move into the end of the year, into the calendar year, where we're going to be highlighting some of the content that was shown at VMworld 2021. It's easy to go see a lot of this content still. If you're interested, just go Google VMworld 2021, and you can still see a lot of the shows in the content catalog. And actually, there's 3 years of content there from 2021, 2022, 2020, and 2019, I believe, as well. And it's a great way to keep track of some of the stuff there. We're really focused on some of what I think are the best things as related to multi-cloud. And Francisco is going to take us through one of the sessions, one of the demos that was done in one of the sessions. So he'll introduce that in a second. But you can go still see that and just register, and it's really a great set of information for you. So with that, I'm going to ask Francisco to introduce himself and to tell us what we're going to see today, and then we'll just jump right into the demo. Oops. Cut out, Francisco.
There, yeah, double click, I think. Hello now.
Just so people know, we go where these are all live, and so we always have a few issues. And right before the show, I couldn't hear Francisco at all, so I had to drop use of my headset. Yeah. Anyway, Francisco, go ahead.
Yeah, no, hi everyone. My name is Francisco. I'm a senior technical marketer with the VRealize automation team. I actually specialize on extensibility. That means AVX, VRL, and even Terraform, right? And today we want to share what we did for the VMware about the VMware Cloud and how easy it is to use VRA to deploy the same kind of workloads across the board. And when I mean VMware Cloud, I mean, VMC, AVS, Google, VMware on Google Cloud, VMware on Oracle, and things like that. And just so you know, in my background, I'm a telecom guy for the most part, with 15 years of telecom experience and automation experience. So talking about distributed systems, that's kind of my thing, right? And with that, I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can actually jump into the system and have something interesting to see. I don't have any slides, so I like to do this. Actually, if you want to see the slides, you can actually go to the on-demand session that we have for the VMworld. We can share with you as well, of course. But I want to go into details because in that session we have enough time, and in this case we can actually go into the system and talk about a little bit more of the details under the demo, right? How we put it together, which is very simple and very powerful at the same time, right? So, as I mentioned before, you have the ability in VRA, and this is
just before I jump into it, just for the users, just maybe just give a setup, sort of like the scenario where, and I think you're going to do this now anyway, but sort of this idea of having to do cloud agnostic deployments, right? Where you're sort of, it's like, I think this is becoming more and more common, and so maybe you can give a little bit of backdrop on that.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to talk about a little bit about infrastructure as code, right? And one of the main issues I see with infrastructure as code is that, okay, yeah, I want to build something for AWS, something for vSphere, right? And most of the time, you have to kind of come up with multiple artifacts that fits in that specific environment. But what is different about VRA is the ability to actually craft infrastructure as code definition. They're agnostic enough that they can fit in any cloud, right? So I can actually reduce my operations overhead because now I just handle one single artifact, which I can put some parameters on it, right? Some input, And then I let the system to find how to the appropriate environment that meets my intention and deploy this infrastructure. So from the operations point of view, is huge, right? I actually reduce the operations overhead tremendously by defining a few lines of code, right? And that's what I want to show you. It is actually a two parts definition. One part inside VRA is how you slice your cloud environments in a way that you can assign capabilities that later on with your provisioning engine, evaluating the cloud templates, they can be matched, right? So what I'm going to show you right now is that I have set up in this environment. This is, by the way, VRA VRA 8.6. It's exactly the same experience that you may have with VRA Cloud. I just happen to have this handy. And in this guy, I actually set up multiple cloud environments, multiple VMware cloud environments in this specific scenario. You can actually go into details, and I have a vCenter, but this vCenter is actually living in Azure infrastructure, right? This is the so-called AVS, which is essentially the VMware cloud stack on AVS, right? And you can recognize that I have a couple of endpoints, my vSphere, my NSX, and something very similar happens with Google Cloud. I have my VMware stack on Google Cloud, so I can actually define also my vSphere and NSXT endpoints. Obviously, I have access to a native cloud as well, so VRA has the ability to also connect to that environment and treat it in the same way. So that's the first part, right? I can actually go VMC, Oracle Cloud, and of course, my on-prem, right? I also have my standard on-prem vSphere environment. So I just connect VRA to all those environments. And from that point, it's just a set of policies definitions, right? I'm going to tell VRA how I want to access this environment, how this environment is going to be presented. I'm talking the compute resources, the network resources, the storage resources, right? So I can actually control how those resources are assigned to projects or end users, right? You can see right here, what we call cloud zones is nothing but me slicing those cloud accounts that I just showed you. And it doesn't matter. I can have multiple cloud zones describing specific regions in those cloud environments. So if I want to access a specific resource pool that is in AWS and VMware on AWS, I can actually assign it and then allocate that into a project. Then I can actually have a cluster from the very same environment and assign it to a different project, right? So this is how I start defining all this configuration. And more importantly, I can start telling VRA how I'm going to deal with that, right? I'm going to assign these resources, how it needs to behave. This case, you can see is very simple. I got just one cluster, but at any point I can go and add more. And actually I can add resources very dynamically, but just assigning tags. And this is the same for all the environments, right? So I'm defining multiple resources from all these VMware cloud stacks that are there. So essentially, I'm using VRA like my point of entry. And you can see I do network profiles as well, because VRA has the ability to reuse networks that you have already in place. But more importantly, you can create networks on demand. So if you have the need for creating some router network, which may be behind a NAT, you can actually define that as a policy. All the steps that need to happen, all the directives that needs to happen to actually build something like that. And then through the cloud template, you are going to be able to just call it by a single name, right? So you actually hide the complexity and let VRA handle that complexity for you. And again, this is the same story for storage. I got profiles across all these cloud environments. And I do a little bit more of abstractions, like the flavors, right? Every environment has different flavors definitions, image definitions, but I can actually abstract all that complexity once again through one name. Like in this case, I'm saying, well, I would like to have a flavor mapping for all these environments, and I'm going to call it large. But this is really just a policy that is essentially hiding how I'm going to build these flavors for every single one of the environments. So if I call a flavor name large and my provision engine decides, oh yeah, this actually needs to go to Google, it will know how to interact with Google and tell it, this is what I mean by large for you. And the same is true, the image mappings. Here you can see a few very generic names. But if I actually go inside one of those, you can see, well, let's pick a better example, probably this one. Yeah, this is better. You can see here, I got a couple of environments already allocated, and at any point I can keep add any other environments I have. So I actually hide that specific information and I make it easy to consume to my provision engine. But that's first step, right? This is my configuration, how I define these cloud accounts, how I define the resources in terms of capability, how they're organized, and I tell VRA exactly how it needs to deal with them.
Hey, Francisco, this is Dave. So, I mean, some of our users might be familiar with sort of the concepts with Terraform, where effectively you've got sort of a master script and then this idea of substitutions when you hit certain breakpoints, right? You know, that say, okay, for this environment, you know, you need to do this. It's similar, right? In that a lot of these are building blocks that are predefined for an environment, and then you have like a master view of it in the blueprint that then allows you, as you're deploying, right, to pull that in. Is that a fair summary?
It is. The concept of the infrastructure as code is very, very similar, right? You will see in a minute how I'm going to show you the cloud template, which is the actual definition of the infrastructure as code. And you will recognize the same kind of patterns that you normally will find with Terraform, right? The only thing that I'm doing here is kind of like pre-state my system to say, well, you know, if somebody's asking for this specific kind of resource, and it will make more sense when you start looking at the cloud template, it's going to be able to know what to do, right? It's going to be able to translate that into something that, you know, is very specific to the cloud environment. But essentially, in the most high level, you will see that it's very, very similar. You will see the concept of resources, you will see the concept of tagging, you will see the concept of cloud ini and things like that. That's exactly the same. It's just kind of implemented differently, if you will. But full disclosure, in fact, with VRA, inside VRA, you can actually run Terraform, right? I don't know if anybody is aware of this, but this is something very powerful that you can do. You can actually run Terraform definitions inside VRA. You can even combine those Terraform definitions inside a standard cloud template and run them together, right? Even be able to exchange information. So you can actually get a hybrid definition and take advantage of what VRA can give you out of the box and anything else that Terraform can do. If you actually remember when I mentioned my specialty, I say I work with extensibility a lot, and I mentioned Terraform in there because I use Terraform a lot in terms of extensibility. And I will show you actually a use case that I prepared for you guys today that includes that Terraform with the scope of the public cloud and managed resources. Okay?
Yeah, hey, that's great. And thanks for bringing that up. And so I do a monthly podcast, and we did a show on Terraform and VRA probably 6 months ago. But it's really, you know, at the end, maybe we'll talk a little bit about sort of why you would use both. But we don't want to disrupt the demo here, so keep going.
Yeah, no, and we'll touch into that later on. So what I'm going to show you now is the second part, right? Okay, you got your VRA set up. You know how you want to handle your resources, how you want to assign those resources to projects and whatnot. But now the most interesting part, the second part, is the cloud template, right? These are the artifacts that I was mentioning in the beginning that you can define in a very extracting way and somehow be able to match based on your parameters with the configuration I set up and create infrastructure very easily. In fact, I can take them all the way to the service catalog and expose them in a very simple way so my end user, my developer, either way through the GUI, an API, or even through a Terraform as well, can request resources from VRA, right? So the first one I'm going to show you, it's a small use case that I prepared for that VMware session. This representation that I have here, if you look closely, actually, you can tell that in the middle is a visual representation of a few resources. Again, going back to how this is very similar to the Terraform definition. I have multiple resources. I have a resource which is a virtual machine. I have a resource that different volumes that I created, different kind of volumes, and you can see 3 of them. But I could have easily put one single definition and kind of like loop among them and create as many volumes I want. But I want to show you how you can even have the approach that you can define where you want to get these volumes created, right? Maybe you have some volumes that they really need they are very IOPs demanding. So you want to put it in a place that can fulfill the request. But maybe some other volumes is just for logs, is something backups. I don't know. You may not need that gold tier, so you may separate that execution. And also networking resources, right? So this is essentially what you get in the middle is just a visual representation of what you normally will find in a virtual machine or in a database running a virtual machine. On my left, and going back to the concept of resources, which you normally get onto the providers, it's presented differently, but you get the same thing. You can see right here, especially the first section, right here, that I got a bunch of agnostic resources. These are the resources that you can deploy across any cloud, whatever the type VRA support, right? I'm talking a load balancer, network segment, security groups, volumes, as I mentioned before, and obviously virtual machines. You can do something very similar with Kubernetes, right? You can also have that abstraction. And in some occasions, right, you need something very specific from a cloud provider, right? Think about vSphere, right? We have the concept of custom specification, right? So that doesn't exist in any other environment. So you may need that property. So you can have the specific a virtual machine, let's say for vSphere, which will give you access to those specific properties. And the same happens to any other cloud resource, right? You can see NSX, AWS, that, yeah, you got an S3 bucket. That's a very common AWS concept that you don't see in other clouds, right? Like in Azure, they have something called log and something different. It's not standardized, but you have the access to those resources as well. So you can combine it, and you will see it in the second scenario how I actually managed to combine all these resources plus the Terraform in one single scenario. But for now, I want to focus.
I just want to make one quick comment because we talked
absolutely.
about code. So the thing that's the same as or similar to Terraform is the whole notion of infrastructure and code, as you can see that in the right-hand side. But then we also have the GUI, which allows you to sort of visualize what that looks like conceptually, right, from a sort of interrelationship standpoint. And you can work in either one, right? So that's a difference with Terraform and how we approach things as well. Okay.
And that's something I really appreciate at VRA, right? That VRA is this is the way you have to do it, and that's it, right? It's actually very flexible. Right now, I'm showing you the most common way to build a cloud template, right? I can go to the GUI, I can get the design canvas, put something together, but nothing is preventing me to go to my Visual Studio and work with my code right there and then push it into a version control server, because VRA is going to be able to hook up to that version control server. And I'm talking GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, where they can host my cloud templates, right? I can work with a team and collaborate on building this infrastructure. And once we have something new, we can push it and say, yeah, this is production. VRA is going to be able to pull it, and then it's going to be available to my end users to consume, right? So many different ways to get to the content and the code here, right? And this is also true for, extensibility actions, vRealize orchestration actions, and things like that, right? And obviously the Terraform support that we mentioned in the beginning, you can also do the same thing. So yeah.
I love the visualization. Even if your sort of mode of operation is writing code all the time, it's still great to just be able to see conceptually how the things interrelate, because that's not that easy when you're just writing code.
Oh yeah.
And trying to think about an environment. So I think that's super helpful, just the visualization, even if you do everything on the code side of the house, just to be able to understand what's actually happening, right? Because sometimes you think, oh, this relates this way, and you write the code, and then you go, but if you were to visualize it, you'd understand that it's not the way you thought it was, basically.
Exactly, and you can see things like this, right? You see these lines, it means, okay, so this resource depends on this resource. I got it, yeah, I need to build the volume before the actual VM. That's okay, or whatever else, right? So yeah, I hear you. Myself, I'm very visual. If I see the concept, I know, like, okay, I got it. A lot faster than if I go through every single line of code, right? And again, VRA gives you the flexibility to say, well, do it as you think is better for you, right? Everybody has different ways of work. Everybody has different experience, so it's up to you. Actually, a lot of people is not aware of this, but if you see this stuff right here, the same code right now is changed, but what I have here is kind of like the equivalent code, but it's presented to me in a different way, right? So if you see here, I'm targeting the vSphere resource. If I switch to the volume, then what you see here is telling me these are the properties that you have already there. You can modify them right here. So even if you don't feel that comfortable writing code, you can actually get started with this, because it's going to start building that code for you. And at some point, you can actually say, well, show me everything that you have, because I don't know what I don't know. And you can say, oh, I actually can select the data store. Great. Oh, I can actually encrypt it. If I do this, this is going to get translated into code, right?
Yeah.
So I don't need to do it, and vice versa, right?
Great way to learn too, right? Well, because it's like you can do it with the building blocks and then see the code, and then you can use the code, just reuse the code. It's like in other places. So it's sort of like because once you start, you use the templates to begin with, but once you see what it looks like and you understand it, you can just do that from that point forward, basically.
Exactly. Like in this case, right? I'm highlighting some code here. This is my one of my volumes. I actually can grab this code and paste, and create a new resource, right? And tweak it a little further. So yeah, reusing is a basic principle in automation, and vRealize is very efficient with that, right? But you see, again, you got many ways to define input, to define code. So it helps you, right? It's really, it gets you together, right? It helps you together. I mean, you define your input. Once with the time, you realize that it's actually not that complex, and you can build this a lot faster, because essentially, if you think about it, whether it's a volume, an S3 bucket, or an API gateway, the concept is just a resource, right? Going back to the Terraform, same story. I just have a resource, give me the properties. I got a very minimum set of properties that I need to provide always, but I also have access to many other properties that I can use and take advantage of, right? So you can always see here, and this is another benefit of the canvas, that you can always get the hints right here, right? So I don't really need to go to the documentation to find out what else is available. You can see here, like as we said before, oh, actually you have an encrypted property. It's a Boolean value. Got it. I just add it, right? And so on. And if I got more resources, I can actually see it from here. Just click, add it, and whatnot, right? So this is essentially the cloud template. And I mentioned it before that this is actually an agnostic template, right? And the reason for that is because I'm gonna give my end user the ability to provide some input, right? And one of the input I want to give to my user is the environment. And right here, I essentially, as you can see, I have very high level, right? I just have one data center, one vSphere endpoint in this VMware Cloud environment. But I can be more granular, right? I can have multiple clusters. I can have multiple EXI hosts, resource pools. It is up to me to decide how I want to present this to my end user. For this demo, I just want to go very high level and say, okay, tell me, you want to go to AWS? You want to go to Google Cloud? You want to go to Oracle Cloud? You want to go to VMware Cloud and AWS? Just pick two options, right? So I'm going to give the user the ability to select that. What I want to show you, and let's get started with that input, right? So you can see that I got pull down menus, right? This is the input that I define, and all this is actually coming from my code. So you can see right here that I define an input called environment, right? Right here, you can see how easy it's for me just to say, this is my list. It's code, but it's not that complex of the code, and actually can even apply some functions, right? Like lowercase this, or do account, or many other functions, because at the end of the day, it's code, right? But it's not as complex as it sounds. You can see this section right here that I'm highlighting. That's actually the code needed for my input, for my first input, right? And it's very easy just for me to add an entry or remove an entry and whatnot. And if you look closely, that's exactly what I have here. I got resources, I got inputs as well. And if I go again to the wizard, it can tell me, oh, I can help you with that. So you need an input. Once again, I can actually come here and say, yes, this is actually an array, or it's an object, or whatever it is, right? And at the end of the day, you get something built. But this is the first part, right? Okay, I'm gonna let the user provide the environment. So how actually I match that intention to the right environment? And it's very simple. Remember, I showed you in the beginning. Okay, you're gonna set up your cloud environment, right? You're gonna tell vRealize how to access that cloud environment, because there is an important concept called constraints. Tag constraints, and it's not metadata. Obviously, you can set up metadata as part of the properties of the resources, but this is a different kind of tagging. This is the tag that essentially indicates the intention, right? So if I look one of the resources right here, the virtual machine, you will see that I have an instruction right here called constraints. And actually, I got it mapped, constraints tag, and I have it mapped to the input environment. So what is going to happen is that when the user select one of the inputs, and let's say they're going to say, well, for the environment, I want to go to Google Cloud. What is actually going to happen is that this variable is going to get populated when we instance the cloud template. And essentially, it's going to tell VRA, okay, I need you to build a resource name, Cloud vSphere Machine, or whatever the name we want to give it. It's a Cloud vSphere Machine type. These are the properties that you need to accommodate. Oh, by the way, it needs to run in Google Cloud environment, right? And I can add more constraints, right? I can add more constraints. Yes, it has to be in a Google Cloud environment, but it has to be in a resource pool, or it has to be on a tier gold cluster. Whatever you define as part of your configuration, you can actually call it from here. So that's why if we go back a little bit to the cloud zones, and we actually look into what I set up here for Google Cloud, you will see here that when I actually select Google Cloud, it's going to tell me, yes, let's go. You want me to go to Google Cloud? That's fine. So that means that I need to go to this workload, to this specific cluster that you have available, which is essentially a resource pool, right? So I don't really need to indicate all that detail. VRA will know by just saying, yeah, you actually need to go to find a resource with this capability, right? Environment, Google Cloud. And if we go back to the design, you will see that that's exactly what I'm going to be providing. And even though my information is Google Cloud, what is actually the value being passed is exactly that string. And I can combine, I can append strings, I can evaluate strings and get something more complicated, right? Not only that, let's take a look into the volumes, right? Here you can see that I have exactly the same instruction, but in this case, the constraints is, yes, take in advance the environment, but you need to build this with a this type of standard. Maybe you want to have a first class this and things like that. You actually can craft that. You can predefine it. You can make it more dynamic. It's really up to you because, again, this is code, right? So let's actually deploy it. Let's see it in action. And while it runs, we can pick up some questions about this. And in order to run it, I'm going to use something called CoStream. If you are not familiar with CoStream, VRA CoStream, is the CI/CD implementation from VRA, right? So it allowed me to build pipelines, right, and assign tasks in those pipelines. So I created this very simple pipeline that is going to deploy the same infrastructure as code definition that I just showed you, the cloud template, in Google Cloud, in AWS Cloud, and in Azure Cloud, right? And you can see that it's just me defining the task, and what I'm actually providing is just the input that I want to provide as part of the task, right? So let's run it so we can see how it's gonna deploy the same workload in these different environments. So you can see now where we're going. One single way to operate, one single artifact, and I'm able to access all these multiple clouds without doing any major changes, right? So if we go back here to deployment, you will see that now CI/CD trigger all my tasks, and it's basically saying, I need you to run all these cloud templates. You can see that it started working. VRA started working on them. It's evaluating the cloud template. It's evaluating my input and going and building it for me, right? So that's all I need to do. Very simple. I just instance these guys, and you will see in a minute, it's going to start building all these resources. We are going to be able to go and detail and see what actually is happening. It will go and check allocations. It will check approval policies, any other policy. Maybe I'm not allowed to do some of these things in this project. VRA takes care of all that, right? And as it goes, it will start building. So also the visual representation of that cloud template, but now it's going to be actually something real, right? And you will see the details in a minute. So while we wait for this to complete, any questions? Does it make sense?
No, we don't have any questions on the line, but I do think this whole process illustrates sort of the value of having a vRealize automation, either sort of as your sole vehicle or as a vehicle that works with something like Terraform, because this what in the discussion I've had with I can't remember who was on the show with me. It's this really gives you your policy backbone, right? It's like this is the ability to sort of manage at scale, like who use what environments and sort of what resources will be used in which particular environments and what teams can sort of deploy to where. And that's when it really makes sense, when you sort of need to manage at scale, a set of environments for potentially multiple teams, and you really want to have sort of that knowledge centralized around where everything lives and what policies are applied to it. This is where something like a vRealize automation shines, basically, right?
Exactly. And if you think about the vision that we have with VRA and for the vRealize suite in general, is that we are truly making the clouds invisible, right? So I'm just giving you one set of APIs. I'm giving you one, say, a service catalog. I'm giving you one single way to build infrastructure, right? And it doesn't matter where it's actually going to be running, right? You are going to have the guardrails in place. But from the end user point of view, is just need this infrastructure. These are my requirements. Go and build it yourself. And right now, you see how easy it is for me to go and deploy in Azure and Google Cloud and VMware. I'm using exactly the same VMware workloads, right? This is VMware stack that is running. So I don't really need to change anything. Just say, hey, one single artifact. I change the input, the property, and then it goes without any changes, right? And that's it. It gets built. You can see in Google is completed, and you will see in a minute how ABS is also completed, VMC is completed. And what is more important, right, beyond provisioning, I'm going to have access to the same operations, right, the second-day operations. I'm going to be able to chain lease. I'm going to be able to power off everything. I'm going to be able to scale. I'm going to be able to change the properties, right? Maybe change my mind and say, you know what? I need more volumes. I need to add these volumes. So I get all these operations available. You can see here, and that's something that you don't get with Terraform, right? You don't get these second-day operations out of the box. And you can see that exactly the same experience. It doesn't matter where they live. If I go into this resource, you can see I got a volume. These are the property that I made. I got a virtual machine. And you can see right here, this is running on Azure, right? That's the cloud. On top is a VMware stack, but it's in Azure, right? And I got every single detail. What is also important is that any metadata, any rules, any governance that I want to enforce is enforced across the board, right? I'm not having to make any tweaks. It's just one single artifact. And if I go and show you now Google Cloud, you will see, by example, in this case, you will notice that I have the same kind of tags here because I need that because this is from operations. They need that information as well. And you get all the details. It doesn't matter where they live. It's one single point of entry for all of them. And
the beauty is also that if you use this sort of for ongoing lifecycle management, it's also recorded and tracked in this one central place. So you sort of see everything that's happening, and you have much tighter control. I mean, and that's obviously something that has to be administered properly as well. Whereas, like, you don't provide access through secondary means and so forth, but you can manage this and control it if you need to, if you really need to have that level of control.
And that includes any Terraform execution that you run, right? Because the state is also important. And here, this is the equivalent, right? I'm showing you the state, right? I'm telling you how it's performed, it's attached. These are the details and which machine is using it, properties, anything associated to the resource, right? And this is true for any resource, right? So this is pretty much what you get when you run any Terraform to get this kind of resources. So I got the state, and the state is going to be handled by VRA. Even if I have a Terraform, which is what I'm going to show you now, that state is also going to be saved inside VRA. So I don't really need to worry about, oh, I need to provide a backend, or I need somehow to get something more sophisticated to work with the state, right? So everything is consolidated. And that's what I want to show you now, right? So now you understand the basic concept of the cloud template, right? I got resources, I define constraints. So those constraints can be matched against my actual resources, my cloud account resources and cloud environments. So I can start building resource infrastructure. But don't stop there, right? As I mentioned it before, you can actually start going one step further, because once you start in public cloud, you know that you have access to managed services, right? And for that, I have this use case that I crafted for you guys, which is the same virtual machine that I was developing in ABS. But now I wanted to extend a little bit further, right? I want to build my tier 2 application, so I have a front end and back end. But the back end, I'm pretty bad with databases. Everybody that knows me, they know that I don't like databases. I don't want to deal with them. So what I did here is that say, hey, you know what? Azure provides the Microsoft SQL database access. That's all I need. So they will take care of the complexity. So for me to put together a database, just like any other resource that I show you, it's as simple as say, well, I'm going to create a database. I'm going to define the server. So if you look at the code, same logic, right? What is the type? What is the name? What is the type of resource? What are the properties that you support, right? And if you're familiar with databases, immediately makes sense, right? Oh, yes, you need a login for the database. So this is my server. What is the version of the SQL that I need to provide? All those properties, you can provide it here, right? And I actually went ahead and I didn't only create the database server, I actually created a database as well, right? I give it a name, actually a name that is going to be collected from the end user, right? I want the end user to provide me the password, the database username, and the database name. So I can use that input as a property, assign it to the property inside the resource. But not only that, once I have this front end and database built with managed services in Azure, I need to open the firewall between them, right? So I could do it with extensibility easily with AVX or vRealize, right? That allows me to run any scripting, Python, PowerShell, JavaScript. But just for this session, I want to show you that inside vRealize, you can take advantage of Terraform as well in terms of extensibility. So in here, what I'm doing is actually calling some Terraform configuration files, the standard. So this is kind of my front end. And that is pointing to the actual version control server on which I have my Terraform configuration files for HashiCorp. And then what I'm doing is actually collecting input from these guys and pass it, output from these guys and pass it as an input in the Terraform, some Terraform variables. So it's going to be cascaded down all the way to the Terraform execution that once again is going to run inside vRealize. So let's actually try it. Let's see it, right? So I'm going to deploy this. And you will see how it will follow the same process, right? I got some input. Yeah, the standard is fine. And now it's going to start going in the same process that we had before, right? It's going to start building resources. So it's going to evaluate everything. It's going to say, you want me to build this resource first? Okay, let me see if I can allocate it and reserve the access. Let me see if you got permissions for that. Let me see if there is any policies. Let me see any guardrails that you may have defined in vRealize. Everything is being checked, right, for all these resources. And it could be very granular to say, well, yes, you can actually do it, but you are not allowed to run Terraform. So that's going to be evaluated. And it's going to say, yes, you may actually run all these, but you are constrained to this many resources, right? And this many CPUs, perhaps, or things like that. But at the end of the day, same experience, right? It's building a deployment, different kind of managed resource. It doesn't matter. From an end user perspective, I took all that complexity away and make it as simple for them to just, hey, give me some input. Because at the end of the day, they can actually go to the service broker, right? And what I just show you, right? I went through the actual code, but I can actually say, yeah, as an end user, I got a very nice catalog and say, yeah, this is actually what I need. Give me your input, give me your name, and submit, right? And again, that's all you need to do, right? As an end user. It doesn't matter if it lands in Azure managed service, or maybe you decide to go to AWS RDS because you got VMC. That's all good. You can actually do it that way, right?
Yeah.
It's your decision. It's no mandate. And here you see resources are being created, and you can get detailed information of what's going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so the interesting thing there is, if people didn't catch, a lot of what we've been seeing in this later half is the same blueprint, but it's the difference is that it's instantiated, right? It's like that is the running embodiment or representation of the system that's been deployed. Hey, this has been awesome. I think it's great, really great, a great demo showing sort of the capabilities from a sort of treating every environment being cloud agnostic, basically, right? So that you can build conceptually the representations that would work in any environment, and then make those available to the end users, and still have that as a managed environment, right, at scale, right, where you can manage it at scale. So this clearly makes sense when you if you're the cloud admin and you're sort of responsible for sort of setting up tons of environments that have to be managed, right, where it's like you can't just turn every dev loose and just say, hey, have at it, because do whatever you want. Hey, it's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we probably should move to wrap up. We've gone a little bit longer, but it's a great demo. Hey, thanks so much, Francisco. This is awesome stuff. Hey, for anybody that views this, please, if you really like this content, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you be part of our regular subscriber base. With that, I think we're going to move to wrap up. Thanks so much, Francisco. Any last words?
No. If you don't have access to vRealize, you can actually go to vRealize Cloud. You can actually hit a trial and start testing it yourself. We got a lot of content that you can use as a reference. There is a huge library of blogs describing all these capabilities with end user use cases on which you combine all these capabilities and make something more interesting. So give it a try. Let us know if you have any questions. We're happy to help and assess. But try it. It's really powerful, and you got the better use cases. You can build something very, very interesting with this. Cool. That's it for me. Yeah.
All right. So reminder, everybody that's watching, we're going to be focused on Best of VMworld. If you didn't attend VMworld, you can still go see all, not all the content, but pretty much most of it. And just register, and it's all available. Whatever's available is available on demand. And you can go through it at your leisure. A lot of great stuff, including Francisco's session. Francisco, do you remember the session number offhand?
I think it was 1268 for this one. Yeah,
you can find it. You can search the catalog and just look for vRealize automation sessions, and also Francisco's name is probably there too. Francisco. Okay, Francisco Hernandez, right?
Yes, that's one of my multiple names. Yes, that's so that will work. Yeah, that's
all right. So
my VMware identity. Yeah.
Tune in for our next session whenever coming up soon, and we'll continue this Best of VMworld. Thanks, everyone. Say goodbye with that.
Thank you.